Hi everyone, I'm Leah Odenek, AIPAC's Associate Director for Policy and Government Affairs. Today I'm pleased to be joined by international human rights lawyer and CEO of the International Legal Forum, Arsen Ostrovsky. Arsen is a staunch pro-Israel advocate who works to combat anti-Semitism and the delegitimization of Israel in international forums and on social media. Arsen, thank you so much for being with us today. I read you almost daily on Twitter, so it's really a pleasure to have you here. There's a lot to discuss, so let's jump right in. In May 2021, days after the conflict between Israel and the terror group Hamas, the UN Human Rights Council approved a mandate for a new anti-Israel commission of inquiry to permanently target the Jewish state. Why, briefly, is this commission so problematic?
First of all, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be here with AIPAC, and really applaud you for the fantastic work that AIPAC does in Washington and beyond. Look, the commission inquiry, it's very disconcerting in many ways. You know, we say there are generally only two things certain in life, death and taxes. We can add a third, that Israel will always be found guilty before the United Nations. So, you know, this inquiry, which in many ways resembles more an inquisition, it was created in the wake of Hamas's war against Israel in May last year. But the very resolution establishing this commission does not even mention Hamas, not even once, not once. To complicate things, to make things even worse, the person chosen to chair this commission, a woman by the name of Navi Pillay, has a long-standing visceral hostility and bias against Israel. She has already referred to Israel as an apartheid state, accused us of war crimes, of violations against international law. So from the very beginning, the outcome was already predetermined. Israel was found guilty before even the ink on this resolution was dry.
So the mandate itself is really designed to find Israel guilty.
Absolutely. You know, this is something that is, so unique even in the UN's own system. It's something that is unprecedented. It is open-ended. It's something that will exist in perpetuity. It is something that already found Israel guilty, and it will continue to find the Jewish state guilty throughout.
So this commission of inquiry produced its first report, first of many, last month. Can you tell us a little bit about what the first report did?
Well, perhaps, not surprisingly, it essentially found Israel as the party almost exclusively responsible for all the ills in the Middle East. The initial findings referred to Israel something like 150 times. They referred to Hamas 3 times, and even then it was barely lip service. Essentially, they blamed Israel for the rise in violence, for the domestic situation in the Palestinian territories. They blamed Israel essentially for everything. What was most interesting, though, for me was when Navi Pillay was presenting her findings at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, she said how she was encouraged, those are her words, she was encouraged by the reaction and the response her findings received at the UN. And I was watching her present the findings, and you know which countries were applauding her?
Which countries?
Iran, Syria, Libya, Pakistan. These were the so-called champions of human rights who are applauding her and applauding the findings of this commission. So I think this really goes a long way to tell, who are the parties that are actually supporting this. But was particularly, I think, important, and I know that certainly AIPAC and many other friends played a crucial part in this, is that the United States led over 20 countries in signing onto an open letter condemning the commission and calling out the Human Rights Council for its visceral bias and discrimination of Israel, and specifically the commission itself. So I think that is something that was very, very important to have had 23 countries, including a number of leading democracies, countries from Europe, that were led by the United States in calling out the commission, calling out its bias and its one-sided discriminatory nature.
So the US led this joint statement of 20 plus countries really condemning the commission of inquiry. We hope anyway that this is a first step towards eliminating it, but what else can be done to eliminate this new permanent mechanism within the UN that exists to delegitimize Israel?
It's certainly a critical first step to call out the bias and to call out this visceral obsession and discrimination of the Jewish state before the UN. So that's critical, and that's the first step. But I think we need to go beyond mere words, also into actions. And in this regard, what I think is critical is the COI Elimination Act, which I know AIPAC is certainly championing here in Washington. It's something that, on the one hand, it's important to not give any kind of legitimacy or credence to this commission inquiry, which is certainly what the COI Act does, but also to withhold funding to the commission itself. I understand something like $1 million plus is meant to go towards the commission, that's been allocated towards that.
I mean, that's of US funding.
Correct, and that's just towards the UN Human Rights Council. And so there is certainly precedence in terms of the US response to other UN agencies that have exhibited such kind of, obviously, bias and discriminatory practices and double standards.
I think it's not just the Human Rights Council, but to the Commission of Inquiry itself, correct?
Correct, specifically. So essentially, as I understand, the COI Elimination Act will hold the money in escrow, so to speak, and if the UN Human Rights Council removes this commission and shows legitimate reform, then obviously that money can then revert back to the council. But until such time as the commission certainly continues in its current form, then I think it's important to support this act. And I understand, and I know that it's something that has really received bipartisan support, which is something that's exceptionally important, as has really both parties have really come out strongly, including the White House and State Department, in condemning the Commission of Inquiry and its treatment or mistreatment of Israel.
Yeah, I mean the obsession, the obsession against Israel from the Human Rights Council is something that both parties have recognized and are trying to do something about. Yeah. Let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. It seems there's been an uptick in efforts to delegitimize Israel, including recently being falsely labeled as apartheid by NGOs like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. With the addition of the UN Commission that we just mentioned, we have the criminal investigation at the ICC into purported war crimes. It seems like there's a concerted effort going on here. To what degree are these various efforts coordinated?
To a very large degree. None of this is a coincidence, and none of this happens in a vacuum. This is really part of, and I think you alluded to it in your introduction, part of a really long-standing campaign by actors in the civil society world, including Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, and others, and now also, of course, at the UN itself as well. Part of a really long-standing campaign to delegitimize and vilify the Jewish state, to apply this double standard, which is not applied to any other country in the world. Israel doesn't ask, nor does it expect to be treated differently. It wants to be treated like any other country. And the problem is it is systematically denied that opportunity, and really none more so than as we see before the civil society world, before groups like Amnesty and Human Rights Watch, which make these outrageous, really libelous allegations portraying Israel as some kind of apartheid state, which is, of course, couldn't be further from the truth. Israel is very much a vibrant, open democracy where Arabs and Jews live side by side with full civil rights. So I think it's...
We look at the last Knesset.
You certainly look at the last Knesset, absolutely. But something that's really important here is that, and as we're specifically looking at the rise in anti-Semitism and violence against Jews, including in the United States and elsewhere, of course, around the world, again, this doesn't happen in a vacuum, and in many ways it's a result of this pervasive discourse that vilifies Israel, that blames Israel for so many, not just the world ills, but domestic ills as well. And in many ways it incites or gives people a kind of green light to carry out attacks, to reflect those attacks on the Jewish community, as well as we're seeing, a rise also in violence as well. And again, this doesn't happen in a vacuum in many ways.
I actually want to follow up on that point, but a little bit later in our discussion. Sure. The Jerusalem Declaration was released by President Biden during his visit to Israel. And in that declaration, this was one of the issues that he tackled. He makes clear that U.S. policy is to combat all efforts to boycott or delegitimize Israel or unfairly single it out in international forums, which we were just talking about. Do you think that this clear statement of American policy, strengthens Israel in the international arena?
100%, absolutely. It strengthens Israel in the international arena, and it also reinforces to the international arena this incredibly strong bond that we enjoy with the United States for the world to see. I don't know how many other countries in the world enjoy such a declaration as Israel has with the United States. It's something that really puts words to action, and really underscores and entrenches the commitment of both countries to a strong, stable, prosperous Israel and strong Israel-US relationship. And as you said in your introduction, it really goes to very concrete examples and details, with the US really underscoring its commitment to stand up for Israel in the international arena, to call out the bias, to call out the discrimination, specifically before the international arena and the United Nations and the ICC, some of the points we've been discussing now. So really, I think it's a really powerful document, not just symbolic, but one that's rooted in actions and important undertakings.
So that is a positive note, but even on a more positive note, just about in terms of topic here, I want to talk a little bit about the Abraham Accords, about the normalization between Israel and its Arab neighbors. The last few months, we've seen the Negev Summit. Just a few weeks ago, we had the Bahrain meeting and President Biden's trip to Israel. All are part of trying to create this new regional architecture taking hold in the Middle East. Do these relationships translate into what's happening at the UN or in the rest of the international arena?
You know, there's a UN timetable and then there's a real world timetable. The UN timetable works at a slightly slower pace. At the UN, these relationships take a little bit longer to play out, and we're seeing slow but very incremental changes in perhaps voting patterns. But on a positive trend. But in the real world, in the Middle East, we're certainly seeing the incredible, tangible benefits of the Abraham Accords, and certainly of the United States leadership in not only strengthening them, but even hopefully advancing them to other countries in the region as well. The president, of course, just came back, not just from Israel, but from Saudi Arabia. There are other countries as well that are now interested in advancing this relationship. We're seeing discussions about a regional alliance with respect to the Iranian threat as well, which is critical. What was really, I thought, interesting was before the president's visit to Israel, when the White House said that a large, really one of the key objectives was really to underscore Israel's integration into the region. Which I think is crucial. It's crucial not only for the security and stability of Israel, for the Middle East, but also for the United States. And having that active leadership, that engaged leadership, I think is crucial in order to advance that.
So step by step, hopefully one day it will translate into the UN as well and other international forums. To shift gears back to what we were talking about before, the BDS campaign is nothing more than an effort to delegitimize Israel. But BDS leaders have tried to promote the campaign as a noble movement to help the Palestinians. Recently, we've seen it manifest itself in a much more outwardly anti-Semitic way, as you were beginning to touch on. Could you tell us about some of the new trends within the BDS movement?
Sure, absolutely. You know, the BDS movement, as you said, you know, it portrays itself as some kind of noble movement that talks about Palestinian rights, advancing peace, but it doesn't do any of that. On the contrary, it denies Jews and Israelis their rights. It seeks to portray Israel as some kind of pariah state. And at the end of the day, it's the Palestinians themselves that lose out. They lose jobs, they lose opportunities. So instead of investing efforts in boycotting Israel, in divesting from Israel, I think those that truly do care about peace ought to be investing in bringing parties together, in bringing jobs, in facilitating dialogue. That's number one. But number two, I think, as we've seen certainly in recent weeks with this mapping project in Boston, that it really does underscore that at its root, the BDS is it's underpinned by this, visceral Jew hatred.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what this mapping project is?
Sure, absolutely. The mapping project essentially it emanated from Boston, and what they try to do is they put on a map and identified all the Jewish Zionist organizations as they portrayed them, and that included, from their perspective, everything from JCCs to the Jewish communal organizations and even synagogues. And what they said was these groups were part of this essentially broad conspiracy responsible for a lot of the ills, not just in the Middle East, but in America as well. So this was pure, utter incitement and really reminiscent of some of the darkest days that the Jewish people certainly have experienced, going back certainly to the 30s. It was very jarring to see that. But what was really, I think, also really important to underscore that so many people came out to speak out against this. So many of our friends on the progressive side who said this cross all red lines. This is unacceptable. The FBI is looking into this. Members of Congress from both parties spoke out unequivocally to condemn this project for the really unhinged hatred that it was and that it is.
So, officials and government are looking into this. What more can be done?
Look, certainly calling it out for what it is important. The FBI and the authorities are certainly looking into this to see whether any laws were broken, any laws with respect to incitement, perhaps, incitement to racial hatred and violence. Certainly having members of Congress speak out anytime there's racial hatred or anti-Semitism is critical, is crucial. And that's something that happened here, and I think that's really, really important to have seen this kind of, really from both sides. This is something that really unites both parties to speak out, and I think it's something that was really important in this perspective.
Still, quite a concern. Staying on the topic of anti-Semitism, you're on social media. I told you I read you daily. But social media and anti-Semitism on social media has gotten so bad that even UNESCO, not a particularly friendly organization to Israel, recently reported that social media is a breeding ground for Holocaust denial and distortion. Where does this denial of history come from? And what is being done to change it?
Social media can be such a powerful, such a positive tool to allow us to engage with people, to have discussions. But it can also be this, in so many ways, this cesspool of vitriol and hate, and something where not just anti-Semitism, but Holocaust distortion and denial flourishes because it's so difficult to control this. It's so difficult to monitor this. It's it mushrooms at such a rapid pace when we have the social media. It's there 24/7. You can have anonymous accounts where it's difficult to actually portray from which country you are writing this, from which server is hosting you, and in which country you are doing this from. So in a lot of ways, it continues to flourish unregulated completely in this virtual world. There are certainly many things that can be done about it. We can certainly do more by collaborating and working with the social media companies, with the servers, with the social media tech giants, and to encourage them and to foster a greater sense of action, responsibility from them. It's always a tough debate, certainly in America, where you're dealing with free speech issues versus hate speech issues, and obviously the protections that are afforded under the Constitution. But there is certainly this kind of really dark discourse that is happening online that we really need to call out. First of all, it's important, but also work with the IT companies, with the social media companies, in order to get them to monitor this and to take this kind of material off, especially when it contributes to the incitement and hatred and violence that we see it emanating. Mm-hmm.
So, to end our conversation, I'd like to end on a lighter note. We talked a little bit about the Abraham Accords, but can you share with us some of the other positive changes you're seeing in terms of Israel's image in the international arena?
Absolutely. I think the Abraham Accords was certainly in many ways a paradigm shift in the region, in the world, in terms of how Israel is perceived. That there are countries that are rushing to embrace Israel, to work with us from our technology to everything we have to offer in order to better society. I think we're seeing a lot of victories in the public diplomacy arena, in terms of, we spoke about BDS, and in many ways, we are defeating BDS. One only needs to sort of point to the recent the recent case of Ben & Jerry's and Unilever with the agreement that we saw, and Unilever's reversal of the Ben & Jerry's boycott, as we saw with members of Congress and different states speaking out with the BDS anti-BDS laws being enforced. So we are winning these battles. We're winning these battles because we are working with our allies in the US, across the region, and certainly something that AIPAC is really doing to champion here in Washington and beyond.
Arsen, thank you so much for a fascinating conversation.
Thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be here with AIPAC.
And thanks to all of you for joining us on the AIPAC app. See you next time.